Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan, and this is a follow-up to the growing story about Humza, the £250,000 to the UNWRA from the Freedom of Information request I got back a couple of weeks ago, and this morning's front page story in the Telegraph. Now, a bizarre thing's happened. Humza has taken to Twitter. And what I would refer to, because we've all seen it in Twitter, somebody having a meltdown. You know the way when you bam somebody up a wee bit and they just lose it and they just throw hundreds of words onto Twitter? This is what Humza's done. He's done about 7 or 8 tweets in a thread, and I'm going to go through them all because each one is as ridiculous and nonsensical as its predecessor. Okay? So the first one, he says, I don't usually respond to smears against me or my family, but this story is so outrageous, it requires a response. Most of my political life, I've battled insinuations from sections of the media desperate to link me to terrorism, despite campaigning my whole life against it. So let's have a look at those 2 lines first. He doesn't normally respond to smears, but why this one then? Why all of a sudden have you decided to do this one? And let me remind you, Humza, that in the story, there is a quote from the journalist who has had confirmation from the Met Police that there is a complaint they've currently got about you. Your normal line at this point would be, live inquiry, can't say a word. But you've decided not to do that. You've decided that you've got to respond. You are aware that that's not normal, okay? To suggest that most of your political life you've battled insinuation from sections of the media desperate to link you to terrorism probably has something to do with your actions. I mean, not so long ago you had one of the chiefs from Hamas in your very office, which would suggest a link to terrorism. Now, what you could say is, I didn't realise you were a terrorist, or you possibly don't see Hamas as a terror organisation. Which is it? Because if you have been campaigning your whole life, as you say, against terrorism, I'm quite sure you would have a decision and came to a decision on whether Hamas are a terror group or not. The fact you had one of them in your office would kind of blow you out of the water, because if you've been campaigning for it for so long, you would kind of know that you'd ties with Hamas. So, that's your first tweet, blown out the water. In your second tweet, you say the latest smear from the Telegraph is just a continuation of these Islamophobic attacks. To be clear, the Scottish Government gave money to Gaza, like virtually every government in the West, because of the unarguable humanitarian catastrophe that has unfolded there. Again, let's look at both of those lines separately. You want to bring Islamophobia to the table. The Daily Telegraph report was about you changing the decision of Scottish Government ministers and going against their advice, and instead of giving money to UNICEF, as suggested and agreed by ministers, you at the 11th hour, from total left field, decided to give it to UNWRA. That is the point of the article. Not the fact that you gave money to Gaza, which is obviously a Muslim country, which is why you're feeding into this Islamophobic nonsense that you take to quite often. Remember your speech, which was horrific, not so long ago in the Scottish Parliament, where you read out a list of jobs and shouted "white" at the end of them. Should maybe calm down a wee bit, son, right? Nobody has made any Islamophobic attack in the paper. You've decided to bring that to the table, because it's probably one of the few lines of defence you've got on this matter. The second point you say is about Scottish Government giving money to Gaza, and virtually every government in the West was done it because it was unarguably a humanitarian catastrophe. Nobody is disagreeing or saying otherwise. Again, the whole point of the article was about you totally turning around a decision to already give, which everybody would have been comfortable with, by the way, to give the money to UNICEF for a particular need, which miraculously, under the freedom of information that I received, you were the one that said you wanted to give money to Gaza, a second tranche, because you'd already gave $500,000, remember? And that was because of a shortage of water. So the ministers decided and advised that UNICEF's water fundraiser would have been an ideal place for you. And the money would have unarguably went to this humanitarian catastrophe that you discuss. But again, you want to deflect from the whole point of the piece. In your third tweet, whether funding was given to UNICEF or UNRWA, both are of course UN agencies. It was always for the people of Gaza. Funding to UNRWA was deemed the most flexible way of ensuring money got to where it needed. Hence why so many governments, including the UK, gave millions to them. 2 lines, let's look at them individually. Whether the funding was to UNICEF or UNRWA, you're suggesting that they're both UN agencies and they both would have ended up in Gaza. Right? Okay. Let's say you're right. I tend to agree with that comment. Why did you change the decision then? The government ministers all agreed and were advised that UNICEF was the best place, and you're right, it is a UN agency, and if you're adamant that both places would have worked out the money going to Gaza, why did you change the decision made by the ministers? Why did you not just let it go to UNICEF? If what you say is they're both UN agencies, the money would have went to Gaza. You could maybe try and explain that, because it would go some way to explaining your bizarre turn of events, which I have under the Freedom of Information Act. Got all your notes, retracted or not, you can see where the decisions were made. And you're saying that the UNRWA was deemed the most flexible way of ensuring money to go where it was needed. That's totally inaccurate. Remember, I have the FOI, which shows clearly you wanted money to go to Gaza, this second tranche, to help with water projects, and UNICEF had the very project for you. You also say that millions was given to other governments. That's right. And you also gave $500,000 earlier in the same month, or the same 30 days, to UNWRA. We're not discussing that. We're discussing why you changed the decision, the Scottish ministers, to give it to UNICEF. Your arguments are wearing thin. This is the fourth. UNRWA, of course, had nothing to do with my in-laws being able to leave Gaza. They were able to leave Gaza due to the hard work of the crisis team at the FCDO, which is the UK Foreign Office, like every other British national. The Foreign Office can, of course, confirm this. To suggest otherwise is a flat-out lie and smear. That is fantastic, Humza. Thanks very much for thanking the British government for helping you in your time of need. That is absolutely tremendous. What I would really like to know is what Foreign Office personnel were on the ground in Gaza to get your family from Gaza City south through to Rafah and pass through a closed border. That would be fantastic if you could tell the Scottish public how that happened, because I don't think there'd be enough, if any, Foreign Office bodies, feet on and boots on the ground in Gaza to suggest that it was them and them alone that got your in-laws from one end of Gaza to the other and eventually into Egypt. If you want to further, you've taken to Twitter today already, let's take to Twitter again and just explain to the Scottish public how that happened without any other bodies helping. That would be fantastic. Next one, I cannot tell you the trauma my family suffered, particularly during the weeks my in-laws were trapped there. To peddle far-right conspiracies in a newspaper is outrageous and will only encourage a further pile-on of vile abuse for my family and I have suffered throughout this period. Now, first thing, I think we got it. We saw enough tears on camera to understand that when your in-laws were trapped in Gaza, it was pretty traumatic. Nobody is trying to say otherwise. However, what I take personal umbrage to is to peddle far-right conspiracies in a newspaper. This newspaper article was published after I gave the journalist a Freedom of Information response from your offices, the Scottish Government offices, okay? So if there's any far-right conspiracy that this newspaper's meddling in, that must be mine. That must be me you're referring to there. And let me remind you, This is not a conspiracy. This is factual documentation provided by the Scottish Government under freedom of information. And you, my friend, look horrific on their evidence. Not mine, not the papers, not anybody that's far right, but your government's emails. That is what the whole thing is about. Not a far right conspiracy, nothing far right, no conspiracy, truths delivered from the Scottish Government freedom of information. You absolutely ridiculous specimen of a human being trying to bring now me as far right and earlier Islamophobia into an argument when you have given no evidence to suggest anything in the story is inaccurate. And I'll come back to that. Then you go on, due to my faith and race, there will always be those, particularly on the far right, there we go, bringing that word again, who will desperately try to prove my loyalties lie elsewhere, that I am a fifth columnist in the only country I call home, the country I love, and the country I have the privilege of leading. Okay, let's just review that. There is nothing wrong with what I'm about to say, but it goes totally against what you've just claimed. You've claimed to be nothing other than Scottish, which would in turn make you British. However, when you took your oath for office, you done it in Urdu. When you took that oath for office, you done it in Pakistani traditional dress, and you have dual nationality as a Pakistani. None of which I have a problem with, by the way. Zero. But I'm not the one that's then turning round and saying that the only country you call home, the country you love, and the country you have the privilege of leading. It doesn't tie together, does it? Urdu, dress, all of that. Why did you not stand up and do it in Gaelic or something then? Wear a kilt. If this was you in your home and the only thing that you have value for. Let's not pretend, Humza. Let's not get away from the fact that you are, and there's no problem with that. I've got Pakistani friends, loads of them, right? Proud to be Pakistanis. You're trying to suggest here that you're only proud to be one thing, and that's Scottish. You're not. And I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with you talking shite, though. And in your last tirade, for the Telegraph to give oxygen to these smears is depressing. Again, what you're talking about is the smears provided by me to the newspaper. No smears. Fact provided by the Scottish Government showing your emails saying, I'll just give the money to UNWRA and we'll just need to live with the financial consequences. That was your emails, not mine. Nobody put in smears. That's your emails that were put out in the ether. And by the way, there's more to come. Because I'm not stupid. The information I have was always going to come out in 3 tranches. The first video I done, the second giving some additional information to newspapers to let them build a story, and the third that I've kept up my very short sleeves for you, and it'll be coming soon. Don't you worry about that. And if the threats continue, it's all right. I actually don't care. This evidence I have is firmly placed with a legal body, a journalist, and plenty of family. So, I have nothing to lose. What you're dealing with here is a guy that doesn't care. I actually don't care about me and my own safety. What I care about is the truth and hunting you from Scottish politics. Okay? Let's just be perfectly clear. Now, one thing that was bizarre in your tirade there, not once did you do what your PR man did with the journalist. Your PR man told the journalist that you had went through proper channels and through a proper process to come to the decision to give this money to UNRWA and totally overturn the previous better decision to give it to UNICEF. Not once have you, in this tirade on Twitter, denied that. The reason being, you can't. Because you and I both know that's exactly what you did. And I have the evidence to prove it. And I will be putting it all out, all warts and all, within the next 5 to 7 days, depending on how other things go on in the meantime. Okay? Isn't it bizarre that despite all those hundreds of words on Twitter, where you had to take to public to talk and defend yourself. Not once did you deny the allegations. And I'm no wearing it. So, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to share it, it'd be much appreciated. Get involved in the comments below. But most of all, most importantly of all, as long as you're not Humza Yousaf, have a great day. Cheery bye now.